welcome to week 6. You get the Valentins and the Zix today.
Lucky you.
Yes, lucky you. We're really excited. This is going to be a good time. Last week, you got to hear from Cole and Caitlin about killing the talk. This week, we're going to talk about creating the culture. So this is kind of the next step in what do you want to do in order to build the home that you want, the place where you want to raise your kids and help lead them through their sexuality. What do we do intentionally? Well, we want to make sure that we're establishing 3 things in culture. There's more than that, but today we're going to unpack 3 of them. The first is that we want to make sure that our home is a place where connection is prioritized. Yeah. We also really want to make sure that our home is a place where curiosity is expected and encouraged in our kids. And thirdly, we want to make sure that our home is a place where there's a really open flow of communication. So those are the 3 things we're going to unpack. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time.
So much fun.
Yes. Okay, so the first one is prioritizing connection. So making sure that we're actually prioritizing connection over correction, which can be hard in kids.
That feels impossible sometimes as a parent.
It absolutely does.
Totally
It takes so much work. And I want Jason to kick us off by talking about this because when he and I got married, he had really already laid this foundation in our home. And I learned a lot from him in those early years of parenting our kids about making sure that we're not correcting before we're trying to connect to their hearts.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Tell us.
Golly. Honestly, from learning from Danny Silk.
Okay.
Really.
Yeah.
So just watch Danny's session and you should have it figured
Yeah.
out.
At the end. Okay.
Danny really helped me parent my kids through the divorce that I went through. And I think a lot of that I had to really focus on, okay, what's more important right now? My kids acting out or how my kids, our kids at that time, feel about me and feel about the world that they're living in. And so I spent a lot of time evaluating where are my kids at right now and where are we at. So like psychologists say that you have an I map and a U map and a we map. And when it comes to knowing how you're feeling about somebody or with somebody, you want to look at that we map. How are we doing? And so I spent a lot of time with the kids. Just, do they feel cared for by me? Do they feel known? Do they feel seen? Do they feel understood? Even on the littlest points. And then from there, I can go into, hey bud, let's talk about how you acted out. Yeah. So sometimes I wouldn't even correct. I could correct their behavior like, hey, please stop that. But then later on, we would talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So not actually in the moment. Because like, you know, when the kids are, especially when they're younger and they're really worked up about something, even irate sometimes.
Yes.
Danny was like, they don't hear you in those moments.
That's true.
Like they can't, they're so worked up that they don't actually, and I'm trying to give them all this instruction, they don't hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that taught me like, hey, if you can get them calmed down and even just get them to stop, and then later on in the evening, come back while you're putting them to bed and talk through what actually happened there.
That's so good.
I just learned repeatedly, like the kids hear that message so much better than they hear, hey, stop it and let's talk about this.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
true.
so true. I can't tell you how many times we'd be in situations with our kids and Jason would tell me, hey, listen, we need to connect first. We need to connect first. This isn't going to go anywhere. Okay, Cole, I want to toss it to you because we, as friends, I just know a bit about your background, just that you grew up in a home with a lot of kids. You have tons of siblings.
Yeah.
You had parents that worked more than full time.
Yeah.
So I've heard you talk about how connection didn't feel like the ultimate priority in your home. And so I'd love if you would talk a little bit about how you feel that affected you, especially as it pertains to your sexual development or what those years were like for you.
Yeah.
And then what you and Caitlin have done to really intentionally create a different kind of space for your 4 kids.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up great Christian home, like love my parents. They worked so hard for us, but in the nature of working so hard, I mean, I would say not only was connection not a priority, I would say we went years with really no connection.
Wow.
Where it was, dad was working 80 hours a week, mom was working 40. They were handing time off. We're in school, then we're going and playing. All of us played sports. You know, so by middle school, once you're in middle school, your sports are every day.
Yeah.
Right? So between sports every day and, I mean, I don't remember having family meals.
Wow.
Like I don't have a recollection of having family meals.
Yeah.
My mom might have a different remembrance of that, right? Like, I don't mean to dismiss the times that we did have it, but it was all correction. And really, when I look back, I'm like, I kind of get it, because you have 5 kids that are all running separate directions. You're running separate directions. And then you get this call from school. And with me as their son, there were lots of calls from school.
We're shocked.
Yeah.
We're shocked.
So there's lots of, well, we have to address this on the fly. It just has to be handled, because the next time we have a chance for connection is a week from now, 2 weeks from now, if at all, right? So I don't look back and think, oh, I've got a ton of pain from it, but it did result in, I mean, the message on sex growing up was, you don't see a woman naked till you're married. I mean, that was the extent of the messaging that I got. And so there wasn't dialogue there. I wasn't talking to my mom and dad about my boyfriends or my girlfriends. I didn't have boyfriends. All 5 of us weren't talking about our boyfriends or girlfriends. Like there wasn't this like, hey, I've got a crush on this person. What should I do? Right? Like we would go to our leader. Thankfully, we had a great church, and all of us were connected with the leaders in our youth ministry, and that's where we went for that kind of stuff. So God supplemented it. The Lord took care of us, but connection there wasn't. I mean, that just was never it. It was, let's get to the end of the night and have all 5 of us still alive.
Yeah.
And all 7 of us with our parents, and
Which is a miracle sometimes.
It is, totally. Like when I think of the stuff that we tried, and like convincing each other to go out the second window with sheets, because you see it on like the things I think back to, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we actually survive? And now, so that has definitely informed us, because we have a big family. We have 4 kids. And I would say even in the last 4 years, our personal priority has been connection over everything.
Yeah.
And that's tough at times, because there's times where I want to correct, and there's times we do lead to correction right away.
Yeah.
But I think thinking back to those moments of, okay, what do I wish would have been different when I was a kid? I don't like the mindset of I didn't have it, so I can't give it. Like I don't. That's never a mindset that either of us have subscribed to. It's more, okay, be the parent I wish I would have had, be the leader I wish I would have had, be whatever I felt was missing from my childhood. I want to be that to my kids. And so we've worked really hard at connecting, at checking in when we know something really matters. This is probably the hardest place of connection, is when it's something that really matters to them that feels trivial to me.
Yeah.
Sure.
As making that matter to me too, so that I'm establishing, I will connect on your terms, not require you to connect on my terms.
Yeah.
That can be a challenge at times, but I feel like we try to do our best to lean into that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really good.
When I hear that, the way I think of it is, if we connect with them on the little things, then they want to bring us the big things.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And so it's that remembering, it might not be like even just our little girl, like, oh, I made you this picture.
Yeah.
It's that whole idea of we have to stop and like, ooh, and wow, that's so amazing, thank you. Because then they want to bring you the other things. But I feel like as parents, we do see that play out. Like they know that you'll be excited when they come home and say they have a crush because you've gotten on their level for other things. So I think remembering that is huge.
Well, and I guess the last thing I would want to say on this too is we've made sacrifices to do it.
Yeah.
Like we've had to say no to what would be amazing opportunities that people really wouldn't say no to, right? Like we've had to say no to trips or ministry growth, or I remember like even coming here to Moral Revolution and being a part of Bethel early on. The Crandalls asked if we would be involved on Sunday mornings, we just said we really can't. Like we said no to what would be opportunities that other people wouldn't, so that we could protect our time and actually not feel rushed to correct, because connection takes more time.
Yeah.
So you have to create your professional career. Sometimes you have to intentionally create space to make sure connection's allowed to be the priority, because I'm not having to rush this response now.
Good.
I think that there's a misconception though that connection takes so long. And the truth is that if you're just really intentional with your time, for instance, if one of your kids, Caleb or something, has a hard time in a day, and even if you correct him right there, and then later on that evening you go down and you just are intentional with him, as he's laying in bed.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you doing?
Exactly.
Do you have any questions about this?
Yeah.
Hey, and you just maybe even reiterate it another way. Like, it may take you 10 minutes.
It's true.
But that extra little touch point, because I know that most parents say, I don't have time. I don't know that you can afford not to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because of how much it saves
has to
you.
be a priority.
I mean, just even how much time it saves you with your kids, having your heart in mind. Like,
think of the counseling bills it'll save.
well, you're gonna. Danny Silk said this to me one time. He said, you're gonna pay one way or another.
Yeah.
Wow.
You either, with your kids, like if you give your kids your time, effort, and energy when you get home, they're going to either drag it out of you or you're going to freely give it.
Wow.
That's so true.
So I would so much rather come home and be like, okay, I'm going to give Edie or give my kids 30 minutes or 40 minutes right now, or spend the next hour going, no, I got to work. No, I got to do this thing. No, I got. So I think that really set me up. And I think it's a big misconception that parents have.
You know, and I want to connect a couple of dots because it doesn't sound like we've talked about sexuality. This has everything to do with parenting your kids and sexuality. I want to highlight the fact that sexuality is not an isolated issue inside of our family. So if you try to establish a culture of connection only around sexuality, but the priority is not connection when it comes to their responsibilities or how they treat their siblings or any other issue that comes up, sexuality, and we've said this before, sexuality is a piece of character development.
Yes.
It's a part of the whole.
Yeah.
And so what you want to make sure you're doing is establishing cultures of connection in every area of your home life so that when it comes to parenting your kids in sexuality, connection being the priority is not a surprise to them.
Yep.
It's a normal for them.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
It's so
It just
true.
becomes part of what is naturally woven into our relational dynamics.
100%.
Love it.
Okay, we're going to move on.
Yep.
Let's do it.
We really want to make sure our homes are places where our kids are expected and encouraged to be curious.
Yeah.
This is a really big deal, you guys, right?
Yes.
This is massive.
We want to make sure that they're free to be themselves. And kids are curious by nature.
They are.
Kids are so curious by nature. We want to actually give them permission for curiosity. Jason's growing up, one of the stories that Jason shares all the time about his growing up years is such a beautiful illustration of this to me. Could you tell a little bit about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was young, probably 10 or 11 years old, I had oral sex with another boy. And I remember just feeling like tons of shame and guilt, but I didn't know why. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that before, because no one ever talked to me that young about that. So I left my friend's house feeling like, ooh, I got to tell my dad. And going back and telling my dad, I explained to him what had happened. And my dad said, oh, you're just curious. Like, you don't need to do that anymore. And that conversation, I wouldn't even say changed my life, but looking back, that conversation changed my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because my dad didn't go, oh, that's dirty. He didn't say, let's read the Bible together. That's actually sex. You're having,
You're in sin.
You're in sin. He just said, oh, you're really curious. You're a curious boy. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
And because of that, I went and told my dad everything that I was going through all throughout my years, my teenage years, because he just helped to guide me. So when I was struggling with porn, when I was struggling with making out with my girlfriend, when I was crossing boundaries, I felt so free to go talk to my dad because he always helped to put in perspective where I was at, who I was, and never just squashed it and put it in this sin box.
Yeah, it was expected that you'd be curious.
Yep.
And he responded with connection.
Yep.
It's really good.
It is.
Yeah.
Really good. Okay, so one of the things that I think is critical, right? We're talking about setting up a culture of curiosity in your home.
Yeah.
This is really huge, is that in our homes, our kids would feel permission to talk to either one of their parents about their questions.
Great.
Yeah.
What we don't want is for our kid to come home and all of a sudden, they heard about something at school. Maybe they heard the term oral sex at school and they want to know what that's about. And they come home and say, Mom, what's oral sex? If you respond with, oh, son, wait till your dad gets home and ask him that question, I promise you he's going to go Google it right away because he doesn't want to wait for dad to come home. If we want our kids to be curious, we need to expect their curiosity and be ready for their questions. Have you guys seen this play out in your and your 4 little ones?
Yeah, totally. I think it's so important to me for sure. As a mom of 3 boys, I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna like reserve to, oh, it's just Cole can have all those conversations.
Right.
If anything, I'm like, I want to.
Because you'd miss out on so much.
Yeah. And so we do this, we practice this at home to where we both know that if a conversation comes up, we're not going to pause the conversation to wait for the other parent out of wanting to, just so that they're there, or because you don't want to talk about it. So honestly, as a mom, I'm like, there's times he's got to have conversations. I'm like, oh, I wish I was there for that one, or vice versa. So we always know we're going to talk to each other about it. We're not going to make the child repeat the whole conversation because we weren't there, right?
Yes.
Like, as much as I wished I had this one conversation with Caleb and Cole, I just get to hear it from Cole, and then that's it. But same for me. Like, I remember having a conversation. It was just Caleb and I in a hot tub one evening talking about like all of these things with boys and girls and what was going on. I'm like, I love that we're doing this right now. I don't need to pause and wait for my husband to be here. And it establishes that connection, and that curiosity is okay with mom. Yeah. So I think it's huge. And making sure to stay curious, realizing when they do ask you a question or they bring something up, asking questions back as your response to see what they're really trying to get to the bottom
about
of.
Where they're at.
You're staying curious with their curiosity.
Well, and I think that parents, we need to keep ourselves in check here, because it can be easy to be, for a dad, for a mom to have a statement, oh, why'd you want to talk to your mom and not your dad about that? Or even if they hear that tone even, they're not going to feel comfortable. I'm like, if my son is wanting to talk with either of us in a hot tub, in a car, whatever it is about this stuff, like we're going to lean into that. And then I'm not going to make him pay the price that he wanted to bring it up with mom.
Right.
I'm not going to make him feel guilty or shameful.
Absolutely.
I'm so pumped that it was one of us that got to have that conversation with him. And so I think that'd be the big thing I would say. I would probably say to dads, because I think dads might have that feeling of, why do you want to talk to your mom about it? You're a boy, I'm a boy.
Wow,
like for our sons, like I think it's super important that we give our children the freedom to talk to the parent they feel comfortable on that topic, and then fill each other. And we have went back at times where Kate filled me in and it came up and I go, yeah, your mom was telling me about that, bud. Do you want to talk to me about that at all?
Yes.
No, it was a good conversation with mom. Oh, awesome. I just wanted to make sure you felt covered.
So
got what you needed.
Right, you got what you needed? Great. If you got what you needed, no problem. If you decide you want something from me on it, I'm happy to give it.
That's so good.
Kids are so curious, and like when I think about it, like they're exploring a whole new world, including their body.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like a whole entire new world that they don't really know how everything works. And if we're open with being a safe place, we will be the resource for them for all those questions and answers. And I think even like, if I look at the church world a lot, we're so afraid of our kids exploring even things when they're really young, like touching their penis when they're a little tiny boy, or touching their vagina. We're like, no, but.
Yeah.
And it sends this message to them like, there are places on your body that are shameful.
Right.
There are places that even just to touch it, to even figure out what it is like, that's a no-no. Instead of like, which is so confusing because they can touch their eye or their ear or their nose.
Right, absolutely.
Instead of just helping to, as they grow up, parent them in it, we send them this really weird message of shame and of guilt. And I think it's a mistake as parents. And I actually, as my kids are getting older and we're having kids again.
Round.
Yeah, another round.
Round 2.
Instead of going like, no, but don't do that, I've been like, telling them what it is.
Yeah.
That's your vagina, and be gentle.
Right.
And because she's not trying to do anything weird.
No.
She's just like, what is that?
Yeah.
Totally.
And not making it a big deal, because I actually think that encourages worse things.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
When you aren't able to engage with the parent, or when you're engaged with the kids in a certain subject, or the body stuff, I think it encourages them to go find that resource otherwise.
Yes.
And then there's a bunch of shame.
Well, it encourages hiding.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we're going to react, and if we're going to act scared, especially, it encourages hiding, because our kids are actually wired to want to please us.
Yeah.
So, but their curiosity is a part of them. They can't help it. They're going to figure it out one way or another. We want to be a part, and we want to make sure that we're creating space for their questions and for their exploration.
Well, and I want to say this. I'm restating this from last week
Great.
from the talk, but the questions, that's exactly it. Like as we mentioned, we have the rule. They can ask any question, and we're going to give them the real answer.
Yeah.
Good.
We're not going to say, you wouldn't understand. I'm not going to demean their intelligence.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you're too young by acting as if there's stuff beyond them. You know, and so it's that is a big part of, to establish yourself as the source. Guess what you have to do? You have to actually be the source.
Yes.
Right.
When they ask the question, even if they're saying, what's the F word? We've actually answered that question with our kids.
Yeah.
You guys know that has backfired in some public scenarios, right? And what maybe backfired out there in a family image, who really cares about family image kind of way, set a precedent of, hey, when I ask Dad a question, he's going to answer it truthfully, no matter how uncomfortable that is.
Good.
And that really encourages curiosity and encourages them to keep coming back with those questions.
And it builds that connection, like
Totally.
massively. It creates this culture, which again is what we're talking about, of connection, where the kids know that at any time they can have access and connection to you and get a real straight answer. It's, I mean, you're setting the bar for your home.
Right.
You're saying, I am who I say I am. You're setting this bar, the standard that they're going to live by.
Yeah, priceless. Okay, this dovetails perfectly into the third culture that we want to be really intentional to create. And that is that we would have a constant flow of communication in our house. And Cole just mentioned this. Last week you heard about killing the talk. So I'd love for them to just reiterate just kind of a quick summary of the main point of that, because that is the antithesis of the talk. Being a one-time thing is the antithesis of the culture we want to create.
Yeah, the talk obviously just creates so much pressure where you're probably showing up to it too late then. And then you're also just having so much pressure that everything's answered right then, instead of understanding it's constant communication. It's communication from when they're super young, talking about penises and vaginas, to more curiosity when they're interested in boys and girls. And so just keeping those doors of communication completely open.
Well, and what connection does is it allows us to go at the rate that the child needs to go.
Right.
Great.
Right. So if I'm thinking pragmatically, then all of a sudden, you know, one of the big questions we get at MR, what's the right age to talk?
Right.
Well, there's no answer to that question.
Right.
The right answer is be connected, and then you'll know the right age.
Yes.
Our kids have found out the full story on sex at very different ages. But because we've tried to remain connected to each individual child, we're able to go at the rate that that child needs to go at, right? Like our oldest really didn't want to have that conversation for years. And so we, you know, one of the things that we try to do is we try to partner in control and share control, where we're not mandating, nope, you're this age, you're going to hear about this. Penis goes into vagina. I don't care if you want to hear this right now or not, you're going to hear it.
Totally.
Right? Like
They're like, no.
Yeah, please, no. Like, you know, I'll never forget telling our oldest when we did, he just went like this, and he felt it was the right time, but he still felt uncomfortable with it. And we, you know, we had intentionally went at his rate, and he was a part of that process. And he at different times would ask us a question about that he heard at school. He one time said, hey, Dad, you know, we're driving over from baseball, and he goes, I heard that girls suck on boys' penises. Is that true?
Wow.
And, you know, immediately as a parent, you're like,
no,
give me names.
Like, nope, that doesn't happen.
You know, and you, like that that temptation to overreact. But why did he feel so comfortable asking that on the way home from baseball practice?
Yes.
The win of connection is way more critical than the loss that he maybe knows something that I wish he didn't know yet.
Absolutely.
And so instead of overreacting, you just casually lean in. I actually was like, yeah, that's part of sex. I really would like to tell you about sex because that's a part of it, and you won't let me tell you about it. What do you think? He goes, I'm not ready yet. And I go, all right. And we actually moved on from that really quick.
Wow.
And we didn't make it an issue. And I didn't make him pay the price with a long, drawn-out conversation. I didn't say, we're going to talk about it with your mom for the next 2 hours.
Right.
Right? Like we...
But can I highlight something here, though? Because the coolest thing that I've watched with your kids is that because they know you're the source, they don't have to go other places.
Right.
Which is what, I mean, that is what we are trying to set you up as king. So that
That's it.
You could have that conversation with your son in the car where we're all like, oh gosh, don't ask that question. But the coolest thing is there's so much control in a healthy way, in the sense that he's going to come back to you.
Totally.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
the fact that you go, hey, that's a part of what I want you to understand with this sex talk that we have, you're not like, oh, if I don't tell him now, he's going to go back to his friends and he's going to
Totally.
Google it and he's going to.
That's it, Jay.
He can have all the information that he wants whenever he wants from you, and there's no shame. Like, that is the culture that we are laying out for you guys.
Yeah.
And the key to that is not being ashamed. The key to that is having those conversations. The key to that is being a little bit prepared. The key to that is communicating.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I didn't, connection removes fear,
It does.
Yeah.
right? So Caleb asks that. Sure, is there still the temptation of,
Yeah.
alarm? Yeah, without a doubt. But because I know where my son's at, and I know where he's at in his mindset, and I know where he's at in our interaction, I actually felt a ton of freedom to not have to sit there and make him,
Yeah.
because a lot of times parents make their kids pay the price for their questions.
Mm.
When we don't feel connected to our kid and they ask a question that we're thrown back by, we could actually make our child pay a price they shouldn't have to pay. They're paying the price for our fear, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And so when I am connected, I feel, you know what? I want to talk about that with you, buddy. You think you're ready? No? All right. Well, when you are, can you let me know? And and I even said that conversation in particular, I did say, we're probably going to come to a point where I have to push the sex conversation before you want to, kiddo, because of your age,
Yeah, he's
and
getting
that
into
you're
high school,
getting a bunch
junior
of
high, high school.
information from other places. So just know, I think we're probably going
Yeah.
to need to lean into that
Yeah.
pretty soon.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, I just don't want to do it right now. And I'm like, great. Let's,
That's
so
so
Beautiful.
good.
Yeah.
that
That's
connection
really good.
gives you freedom
Yeah.
to not parent from fear.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
It's huge. And I think with connection, like as we've established connection with our kids, what's cool is we kind of discover what is our norm. I mean, each child is really different, right? So with my stepkids, we have 2 boys and a girl. And it's funny, as we explore all of those teenage years together, you kind of realize how your kids like to connect to you on different levels. So with Jason, for example, because it was modeled to him, I think, he would check in regularly with our boys. Like, are you looking at pornography? Do you know what masturbation is yet? Do you want to talk about that? Have you done it? He'd check in regularly about that. And I didn't have as many conversations about porn and masturbation with the kids as Jason did, but we discovered that they really loved to come to me to talk about their feelings or their emotions, or this girl that I'm interested in, mom. Or, I remember when our daughter was starting to be interested in boys, or girls in her class were dating people, and she'd have questions about that, or what do you think, or how do you know if you're ready to date? They like to talk to me about that kind of stuff. And it goes back to communication, and it goes back to connection, and it goes back to just, this is all really connected, right? We want to make sure that we're going at a pace that our kids are enjoying. This should be like, these are the years that are actually really fun, and they're learning a lot, and they're discovering a lot of exciting things. And the truth is that God actually designed our kids to grow in sexuality, their bodies, their emotions, their hormones, all of it was God designed.
Yeah.
This should be a fun exploration of who they are. And we want them to be able to come to us and actually allow us to participate, to actually lead them in this journey. Ultimately, I think it's really critical that our kids know that if they come to us, they'll get the truth.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like, son, we're probably going to have to talk about this sooner than you want, because I want to make sure you know the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you hear it from somewhere else, they might not be telling you the truth.
And that's
You
exactly how
deserve
it
to
went.
know the
Yeah.
truth.
It's so good.
That is good.
Good,
Yeah.
Lauren.
One other example I thought of with communication is inside of the home, when something comes into the home, is as a parent making sure that you do communicate on it. My example is a commercial, right? Like, how many times are you watching a sporting event where there's nothing sexual, but then a sexual commercial comes on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's so important that we've done this since they were really young, is speaking to it. Because I think the silence environment
Silence is deafening.
what has been awful for kids, because then they don't know what to think or feel
Right.
about that. I remember being in a Christian home and in Bible college, and this movie we were watching as like a family movie night with this Christian family, and there was this horrendous sex scene, and like the dad, the mom, like nobody said anything. We just kept watching it.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, this is so bizarre. Like, is this normal that this family's not saying anything about this right now with their young girls here? And so I'm like, it's so important that because our children will adopt the same communication that we exemplify for them.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I've seen my kids now, they're like the police, like they're the radar. If something, like they could tell a boy had lipstick on in a commercial, they're like, turn that off. So I'm like, understanding.
It's funny, they always cover their siblings' eyes.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to watch this.
Are
you? I know.
I was going to say, they cover their own eyes. But it's been amazing to watch that. But I'm like, because they know we always communicate on it. Anytime there's something inappropriate, we all guard our eyes. Yeah. So I think just also as parents with communication, knowing that we have the voice and maintaining that until they adopt it as their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is huge. And you know what? In the weeks to come, we're going to unpack more about how to actually respond, because easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Like having good communication or
Totally.
open, like no fear in their curiosity or connection over correction, like easier said than done. We're going to unpack a lot in the coming weeks about how to respond when certain things come up, because the truth is these topics do trigger a lot of fear sometimes, because culture is crazy and our kids are swimming in it right now. So there's more resources available. And as always, we want to make sure that you really engage with the homework after this week. Part of the homework is to be, take a look at these 3 areas and talk to your spouse or have a discussion about what is our culture like in our home? What can we do to adjust? Where do we need to, if we need to learn about prioritizing connection, how are we going to do that? There's great tools available. If we need to learn about how to not freak out when our kids ask wild questions, what are we going to do about that? Yeah, exactly. So make sure to check out the homework after this week's lesson. And you guys, this is an amazing journey. Good job. You're on week 6.
Keep it up.
Yeah, keep it up. Don't give up now. We've got more to come. And we're so glad you're on this journey with us.
Yeah, way to go.